You guys remember that social media trend about men constantly thinking about the Roman Empire? I wonder if maybe Batman is also one of those things that men think about a lot. I woke up this morning thinking about specifically Batman Forever and The Batman. So, Batman Forever from 1995 and The Batman from, I think, 2022. And I know the reason I'm thinking about them because they're the only cinematic depictions we have of the Riddler, as far as I know. So the thing that I started thinking about, well, okay, so I think about the Riddler, and then I think about Batman Forever, and I think about what a terrible movie it is. I think it is one of the worst comic book movies of all time, especially if we constrain ourselves to the DC Marvel universe. Um, Definitely its sequel that came out 2 years later, also directed by Joel Schumacher, is worse, but it's marginally Batman Forever is marginally better. And the funny thing about Batman Forever, if you look at everyone who's involved with that movie, you would think it would have been really good. In hindsight, I don't know. I don't. I remember when the movie came out, but I didn't have all that insight in like the director has this work done. Has done this work, and these actors have done this. But when you look at it, this is the thing. The guy who so Joel Schumacher, who's definitely had some hit or miss movies. At that point, he directed The Lost Boys and Falling Down. So if you were going to say that the guy who wrote, because he picked up the movie after Tim Burton left it, so he brings in Val Kilmer, a dramatic actor. We've seen him where he can be dark and unhinged, like in The Island of Dr. Monroe. We've seen where he can be suave and smooth and a spy. And The Saint, although I think The Saint may have came out after that movie. I'm not going to look that up. But Val Kilmer at that point is a proven actor, and everyone else involved. Tommy Lee Jones was in the movie, right? But the fact is that this guy, Joel Schumacher, had directed Falling Down, and you're thinking the guy who directed Falling Down is going to make a movie about um, a costume, a violent costume vigilante. This should be good, and we did not get that. Meanwhile, when the Batman comes out in 2022, when it's announced, I guess in like either 2020 or maybe it was announced in 2019. I know that Robert Pattinson was training for it during the lockdowns. He was preparing for it up to the lockdowns, and it didn't seem like he was going to get physically fit for it. There was a lot of doubt going into that movie, and it ended up, in my opinion, being one of the best comic book movies of all time, and probably the best depiction of the detective iteration of Batman. But the interesting similarity of the movie is not only do they have and here's another thing, by the way. Joel Schumacher and Matt Reeves were about the same age when they made these movies. And if you look at the movies that Joel Schumacher had worked on, he had a more extensive filmography, and it seemed like a much more proven director than Matt Reeves. I think Joel Schumacher, he's born in around 1939, if I remember the movie came out in 1995. So he would have been, what, I guess around 50, probably around 55 when they started making the movie, 56 when it came out. Matt Reeves, I think, was born around maybe 1966. I think he's 1966. So, I hope I didn't really mess up my math there. No, I didn't. Yeah. So did I? Oh man, I think I totally messed up the math there. The point being, I think he's born in 19. Maybe he wasn't born in 1966. He may have been like 60. I want to say, going off on a tangent. You bring me numbers, I end up going off on a tangent. But I think they were within 5 years of the same age. Okay. So the other similarity, before I went off on that tangent, apologies. The other similarities besides that, not only do they have the not the Joker, I think I may have said the Joker already, the Riddler in them, is the endings of how the confrontation with the Riddler. Because Batman Forever, Batman confronts the Riddler in Arkham Asylum, and the Riddler keeps saying, "I know who Batman is," and he's jumping around the padded room, in Arkham, and then he says, "I know who Batman is. I'm Batman," and he has his bed sheets like they're a cape, and you're like, well, he's went completely unhinged. And Batman's like, "Woo, I don't have to come out of the Batcave. That's great." So then in the Batman, and by the way, spoilers, sorry, he confronts, it's not Edward Nygma. It's, I think it's like Edward Knockman or something like that. But he confronts the Riddler in Arkham Asylum. And everything that he's saying, it kind of implies that he may know who he is. And then it turns out he doesn't. He's saying how they have Edward Knockman or Edward, who's the Riddler, he keeps saying how he has these similarities with Batman. And he's thinking, okay, he must know that I'm Bruce Wayne, because he found out that Edward was a orphan and was a result of a violent, underfunded, abusive foster care system within Gotham. And even though he came from these poor circumstances, these impoverished circumstances, he was able to figure out all of these elements of the Gotham crime world and come up with these plans of revenge and execute them. And that's what he thinks, he being Bruce Wayne / Batman, thinks that him and Edward have in common, and that's what Edward is talking about. No, Edward is saying that they both are willing to take justice into their own hands and basically to avenge people with violence. And that's when Batman has his realization, that his character arc. But the interesting thing there is that confrontation basically confirms to Batman that, one, as brilliant as this guy is, he's not quite as brilliant as I may have thought he was, because he didn't figure out my identity. Because all the other things that Edward figures out in this movie, it seems like figuring out the true identity of Batman would have been one of the easiest things to figure out. So this is what I propose. When you're talking to someone who is very knowledgeable about a thing, they've done their research, they're very insightful, and they're dropping this knowledge on you, and they're leading up to something with that, right? So to give you an example, imagine you're talking to someone about 9/11, and they're telling you, this is the plane that hit the tower at this time, then the plane hit the tower at this time. This is what type of, it was a Boeing so-and-so. There were this many casualties. These are the events that led to it. You had the USS Cole. These are the people who were believed to be responsible until we, whatever. And they're dropping all this information on you. They just really have done their research, right? And it shows. And they're going to wrap it up. They're going to bring it home to that finish. And then when they stick it, they end up saying, and yes, that's why I think aliens blew up the Twin Towers. Something completely unhinged and out of nowhere. We should call that an Edward Nygma, because that's what we got from both of these movies. And I know that's not Edward Nygma's name in the Batman, but that's traditionally the Riddler's name. I'm not going to call it doing a Riddler. Let's call it doing an Edward Nygma. You're sitting there talking to someone. They're like saying, yeah, these are the things that led up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. This is what happened before in 1990. This is what Saddam Hussein's childhood, blah, blah, blah. And that's why Saddam Hussein is still living in Tahiti, chilling out with Elvis and Tupac. That's doing an Edward Nygma. Let's start calling it that. Why not?